Welcome back to Startups Discipleship. This is week 5 of track 5, where we're going over a variety of leadership lessons. This week, we're going to talk about perseverance. Generally, there are 3 different ways of viewing perseverance: resilience, persistence, and grit. First off, resilience. The general idea behind resilience is the ability to bounce back after adversity or disappointment, being able to manage or adapt to sources of stress or adversity. Think Rocky Balboa. If you haven't seen the movie Rocky, what's wrong with you? Where have you been for the past 40 years? Stop what you're doing, pause this teaching, and go watch it right now. First off, Rocky Balboa has an impeccable sense for fashion. Secondly, Rocky Balboa defines resiliency. In nearly every movie, Rocky is overmatched. He's too small, too weak, and his opponents are genetic freaks of nature who far outclass him as specimens. But Rocky is resilient. He just won't stay down. I think the original Rocky movie is brilliant because Rocky doesn't even win the fight. His opponent, Apollo Creed, the undisputed champion of the world, has never needed to go a full 15 rounds with any opponent. And so Rocky states that his goal is not to win the fight. He just wants to prove that he belongs in the ring, and his goal is to be the first man to go a full 15 rounds against Apollo Creed. And boy, does he go the full rounds. 30 years later, in one of the sequels, when Rocky is walking his son through some of his son's personal failings, Rocky says, "You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done." Why is resiliency important in leadership? Well, let's be honest. In leadership, you're going to face adversity. You're going to face disappointment. And you're going to face stress in spades. But can you persevere? Can you go one more round? How much can you take before throwing in the towel? You'll never know until you try, and it starts with hanging in there, with resiliency. Perseverance can also be viewed through the lens of persistence. If resilience is how much you can take, persistence is how much you can give. It is steadfastness and determination on completing a task or accomplishing a goal. It's a willingness to do whatever it takes to get there. If resilience is how long can I last, then persistence is how far am I willing to go. Sticking with our Rocky quotes, every champion was once a contender who refused to give up. Jesus taught us to be this way with God. He told 2 different parables, one about a widow who refused to stop bugging a judge until he brought her justice. And he taught another parable about a neighbor who in the middle of the night would not stop bothering his friend for bread. In both stories, it was their persistence that brought success. And Jesus said that's how we should act in prayer. Night and day, boldly and bluntly bother God until we see results. So why is persistence needed in leadership? Well, chances are, if you're still breathing, you're not finished yet. There's still going to be work to be done. Even at the end of his life, Paul was saying things like, I haven't reached the goal. I still haven't finished the race. If that was true for Paul, then it's absolutely true for us. So what's the next mile marker? When this task that you're working on is complete, what's the next task? What's it going to take to cross the finish line eventually? That takes persistence. And the third lens that you can view perseverance through is grit. Grit is usually defined as the tendency to sustain interest and effort towards long-term goals. It's often associated with self-control and the ability to defer short-term gratification. Human beings have an incredible tendency towards laziness. We like things to be easy. We search for the path of least resistance. We settle for ideas that come to our minds quickly. We love to get jobs done and just get them out of the way, to check the box and move on. So being able to stick at something, no matter how tricky it is, in a range of various circumstances for a long time is a skill and a habit that we have to learn to accomplish over time. To have grit is to have the ability to be motivated by our own efforts themselves. Sometimes it's likened to mental toughness. We often think that successful people are just naturally gifted, that they're smarter or more athletic or more talented. And while natural giftings and genetics do play a role, the more research that gets done, the more studies reveal that mental toughness or grit plays a more important role than anything else in achieving your goals. And this is true in your personal health, in your work life, and in your life as a whole. This is good news because there's not much you can do about your genetics. That's just stuff you were born with. But you can do a ton to develop grit and perseverance. So here's how. In a word, consistency. Gritty athletes are more consistent. They don't miss workouts. They stay on the field after practice to get in extra reps. It's a baseball player taking batting practice when others have the day off. It's a golfer at the driving range or on the putting green when they're not playing 18 holes. It's a football player running the same route over and over and over again until they can drag their toe on the same blade of grass. They don't miss assignments, and they consistently have their teammates' backs. Mentally tough artists sketch every day, even when they don't feel inspired. It's a musician doing scales long after she's capable of performing Mozart. Or a performer singing the same song over and over again with the same amount of passion night after night in city after city, after spending months on the road performing the same song list, which, by the way, is after recording that song 1,000 times over in a studio. It's an actor crying on cue, take after take after take, or a dancer practicing the same steps and movements day after day after day until every micro movement is on point. Consistency. Grit and perseverance lead to consistency. Leaders who persevere work on a schedule, not just when they feel motivated. They approach their work like a professional, not an amateur. They do the most important things first and don't avoid their responsibilities. They have a clear goal that they work towards each day. They don't let short-term profits, negative feedback, or hectic schedules prevent them from continuing that march towards their goal. The good news is both grit and perseverance can be developed regardless of how much talent you were born with. You can be more consistent. And if consistency is the goal, then here are 3 strategies to help you develop consistency. Number 1, define success. What is success for you? Practice this by giving yourself what are called SMART goals. SMART goals are goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And start with SMART goals that you know you can pull off. Maybe it's go 1 month without missing a workout at the gym, or grind out 1 extra rep each time you're at the gym, or go 1 week without eating processed or packaged foods. Or maybe it's pray for 1 hour every morning this week, or call 1 friend or family member to catch up every weekend this month, or spend 1 hour doing something creative every evening during the week. These are all SMART goals. And again, start with ones that you know that you can pull off. Then next time, give yourself something a little more challenging. Practicing goals like these, even if they seem to have no relevancy in your ultimate life goals, can and will develop perseverance and grit, consistency in your life. The second way to develop consistency is to celebrate the small wins. So often we think that mental toughness is all about how we respond in extreme situations. Like, how did you perform in the championship game? Or can you hold your life together when a family member dies? Or did you recover after your business went bankrupt? No doubt these extreme situations test our courage and perseverance and mental toughness, but what about the everyday circumstances? Jesus taught us that if we're faithful with a little, then we'll be faithful with much. Mental toughness is like a muscle. It needs to be worked out to grow and develop. If you haven't pushed yourself in 1,000 small ways, of course you're going to fade and burn out when things get really tough. But it doesn't have to be that way. Mental toughness is built through small wins. It's the individual choices that we make on a daily basis that build our mental toughness muscle. You don't get strong from lifting something heavy one time. It's the repetition day after day after day that develops strength. And so find these little SMART goals and then celebrate the fact that you accomplished them, that you finished them. Celebrate the day-to-day wins. And the third way that we can develop consistency is by developing habits and disciplines instead of developing motivations. Motivation can be fickle. Willpower can come and go. Mental toughness isn't about getting an incredible dose of inspiration or courage. It's about building a daily habit that allows you to stick to a schedule and overcome challenges and distractions over and over and over again. Mentally tough people don't have to be more courageous, more talented, or more intelligent. They just need to be more consistent. Mentally tough people develop systems that help them focus on the important things, regardless of how many obstacles life puts in front of us. It's their habits that form the foundation of their mental beliefs that ultimately sets them apart. So set goals that define success. Celebrate the wins when you complete a goal, and then develop them as habits and disciplines. Stop focusing on what motivates. Over the years, I've watched so many of my fellow pastors quit the ministry and so many churches close their doors. The stress of ministry and the disillusionment of church growth is usually too much for people to handle. Statistics say that 85% of pastors will quit within the first 2 years. And according to Small Business Association, 30% of new businesses will fail during their first 2 years of being open, 50% of small businesses will fail during their first 5 years, and 2/3 of small businesses will fail during their first 10. Most people just don't have it in them to see things through. But that's not true for you. You and I, we're gritty. We persevere because nothing in life comes easy and nothing of real value comes without a cost. So count the cost and see things through to the end, because that's what leaders do. Leaders are resilient, leaders are persistent, and leaders are gritty. Leaders persevere regardless of circumstances.